second meeting, $30 million in cap space, and the Browns officially being out. I'll tell you why it looks like the New Orleans Saints are closing in on Deshaun Watson. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Thursday episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You got me over at Saints Wire with USA Today, Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Now, we're not just going to talk Deshaun Watson today. We've got some wide receiver talk that we'll do as well. The New Orleans Saints not as in on some options as originally expected. What does that mean for them as they pursue their next pass catchers? But first, we got to talk about the position that is going to be throwing the ball. The New Orleans Saints in pursuit of Deshaun Watson, who still has those 22 civil cases open regarding sexual misconduct. He did testify on that on Tuesday, but those testimonies were not made public or anything like that. So we'll see what progress or what happens next from all of that. But the New Orleans Saints look like they're closing in on Deshaun Watson. And there are three main things that really seem to drive that home. First of all, after Deshaun Watson went on to have another meeting with the Atlanta Falcons, actually in Atlanta, while the other teams were going to visit him in Houston, he went to Atlanta to see the Falcons. Remember, he's from the area, all of that as well. The New Orleans Saints ended up having a second meeting with Watson as well. So they turn around, they have the meeting with him, along with the Carolina Panthers. They had the meetings the same day. Deshaun Watson has another meeting with the Cleveland Browns, goes to Atlanta to meet with the Falcons, and then the New Orleans Saints meet with him again last night and brought the full brigade when they went to go and meet with him. Gayle Benson was there. I mean, all the top guns were there for that conversation, and that's pretty significant, especially if you're a Saints fan that woke up this morning on Thursday and noticed what the New Orleans Saints were doing, which were, of course, the new deal for Bradley Roby having been processed, restructuring the deal of Taysom Hill, restructuring the deal of Demario Davis, which has now opened up enough cap space for the New Orleans Saints to be $30 million, $29.9 million under the NFL's salary cap. That means that they now have enough money to bring Deshaun Watson in, probably have to trade away a salary or two in the midst of that as well, but they can get his $35 million base salary and cap hit under their own salary cap before restructuring the deal. They could also send additional draft compensation to the Houston Texans, basically in exchange for them taking on a little bit of that salary cap before they trade him to New Orleans as well. So a couple of different options there. So that's the second really intriguing piece, because we've seen this from the New Orleans Saints time and time again, and we talk about it before every offseason. When they're making room, generally the way that they tend to do it is that they make a little bit of space. They get under the salary cap, they spend some money, then they make a little bit of space. Then they spend that money, then they make a little bit of space. Then they spend that money, then they make a little bit of space. Them having this cavity of $30 million that's just sitting wide open when players like Teron Armstead and Jameis Winston and PJ Williams and Quan Alexander, they're in-house free agents who are usually the first focus for the New Orleans Saints in free agency, are now officially free agents after Wednesday afternoon. That's something unique. That's something different for the New Orleans Saints. So the fact that they opened up the money, that was going to happen no matter what, right? They were going to make that space. But the way that they've done it and the fact that they're sitting with this open cavity definitely tells you something is specific or unique about this season. And of course, they're engaged in trade talks with the Houston Texans to potentially bring Deshaun Watson to New Orleans. So easy to correlate the two of those things. And I think maybe even more than correlate, I think that it's pretty clear that those two things are probably connected. The last piece and the final piece that really tells you that the New Orleans Saints are starting to close in on Deshaun Watson is that the Cleveland Browns this morning were informed that they are out, that they are no longer a part of this negotiation, no longer in the running for Deshaun Watson. So remember, the four teams that were there were three NFC South teams, the Saints, Panthers, and Falcons, as well as the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns now out. Now, Cleveland Browns are going to have some damage control to do because Baker Mayfield already knew that they were going to be pursuing Deshaun Watson. They reportedly told his agent that they were going to pursue top-tier quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson at the Combine. And then you've seen Baker Mayfield go out there and release this statement about potentially leaving Cleveland. And there was some expectation that even if the Browns didn't land Deshaun Watson, that they would still be moving on from Baker Mayfield because they wanted a quote-unquote, I'm not saying this, just reading what the quote was, grown-up at quarterback. Yikes. So Baker Mayfield, the Cleveland Browns, they may have some stuff that they need to work through and deal with. You can find out more of that if you're curious about that situation with Jeff Lloyd over at Locked On Browns. I don't know enough about all that. And the last sort of piece to that third final part of the puzzle there is that not only are the Cleveland Browns out, but according to Joe Person, who covers the Carolina Panthers for The Athletic, quote, barring a Hail Mary, seems to be headed this way for the Panthers as well. That's in response to the Browns having been informed that they are out of the Deshaun Watson trade discussion. So if the Browns are out, if the Panthers are soon to be out, which remains to be seen, that leaves the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the New Orleans Saints probably offer the better team around the player than the Atlanta Falcons do, who no longer have Julio Jones, who's now expected to be released, by the way, by the Tennessee Titans. What a weird situation that became. They have no Russell Gage. They have no Calvin Ridley. They have no defense. The New Orleans Saints have Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. They have the defense. Reloading with Marcus May after losing Marcus Williams was huge. They would be able to bring back Teron Armstead, who sounds like he's waiting to see what happens with Deshaun Watson before returning to New Orleans, and would possibly make the decision to return to New Orleans if they landed Deshaun Watson. So if you look at the team that seems to have and be in the best position to either land or not land Deshaun Watson, by the way, because the Saints actually have a good backup plan. If they don't, the Falcons are just stuck with Matt Ryan. It seems as the New Orleans Saints look to be closing in on Deshaun Watson. Now, if they're going to do that, they're going to have to give up a lot of trade assets. And because of the sexual misconduct stuff, because of everything going on around Deshaun Watson, it's not going to be as much as the asking price. Remember, the asking price is going to come down very likely in terms of what the actual payment is. So let's talk about what the trade could look like. I'll give you some of the scenarios that I've seen floated around already, and we'll talk about which one makes the most sense for the New Orleans Saints as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And I appreciate you as always for being here, and I appreciate very much BetOnline for being our exclusive sports book partners here at the Locked On Podcast Network. You can check them out over at betonline.net, and you can go and see all of their different odds, lines, and props, especially when it comes to the tournament tip-off tonight. Looking forward to the college basketball tournament, March Madness, men's and women's, getting underway here soon. Going to be a ton of fun and a lot of stuff for you to bet on there as well. Who wins the tournament game by game. You've got player performance props, a whole bunch of stuff that you can check out. And it's all there for you over at BetOnline, as well as everything you need to make the best bets. Understand all of the trends, everything that's changing in the landscape of betting. You can find with news, analysis, and podcasts over at BetOnline. So go and check out their new mobile site, their new desktop site, everything that they have there that includes live betting, as well as your favorite Vegas casino games as well. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Make sure you go and check out that Locked On NFL YouTube page for me as well. You can see my bright and shiny face. Melanin bright? I don't know. Can melanin be bright? I don't know. Doesn't matter. You can go and see my bright and shiny face on Tuesdays with Luke Braun over at the Locked On NFL YouTube page, as well as the Locked On NFL podcast. I don't know what's wrong with me. Which you can find wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube as well. I know what's wrong with me. This free agency period has been absolutely insane, but a ton of fun to cover, and I'm grateful again to be a part of your day. It looks like Deshaun Watson is going to end up in the NFC South, and it will cost a pretty penny in order to make it happen. Let's talk about the trade packages that the New Orleans Saints could potentially put together, some of the ones that I've seen floated around, and whether or not they're worth it. So that's going to be my big question in all of this. Are these trade packages worth it, right? You're thinking about a potential 6-game suspension. You're thinking of what you're tied to, all of the off-field issues. You're thinking about also 10 to 15 years a potential starting quarterback play as well. So a lot of things that you have to kind of weigh and balance and figure out. There's a lot of like morality to this conversation, also that we've discussed and we will continue to discuss as we go through this potential acquisition for the New Orleans Saints. And so let's start off with what the asking price was and what the parameters of the asking price were. We'll set the table first here. The parameters for the asking price, and you'll have to forgive me, you're going to see me look down if you're watching me on YouTube. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't miss if this actually happens. So you'll get probably a live reaction at some point if that does take place. Otherwise, we'll have another podcast later, don't worry. So the parameters of this trade, 3 first-round picks, right? This is what the Houston Texans, Nick Caserio, all these guys were originally asking for, right? So these are the parameters. 3 first-round picks, which was always sort of the cornerstone of the trade. Additional draft compensation, we'll further define that in a moment. And young starter quality players on cheap rookie deals, okay? So when it comes down to all 3 of those, New Orleans Saints have the 3 first-round picks, 2022, 2023, 2024. They could trade those away. Again, I've told you before, I am of the less need school of FD's picks. Don't really, I love the NFL draft. I love the NFL draft for day 2, day 3 as well, because those are the guys that I really root for and all that. Those are the ones that I really dig into, all that stuff. So trade the first round picks, doesn't matter, especially because you also know that you might potentially be able to trade away the rights to Sean Payton as a coach to another team next season, which might yield multiple first round picks as well. So you might be recouping a little bit of that. So you're kind of trading what you're expecting to get back already. Okay. 3 first round picks. Easy. Additional draft compensation. Now, for some folks, that meant multiple day 2 selections, day 2 and day 3 selections, all that. And then there's the other big piece here, which I think is actually the second biggest piece. Those young starter quality players on rookie contracts, cheap rookie deals. The New Orleans Saints don't have a lot of tradable contracts. They've restructured a lot of contracts this offseason. They were trying to get from over $76 million over the salary cap. Of course, that's the way that they do it. So with that being the case, the New Orleans Saints don't really have a ton of tradable contracts, but the tradable contracts that they do are the young starter quality players. There's CJ Gardner-Johnson, who has since scrubbed all of his stuff around the New Orleans Saints off of his social media. Now, we saw that earlier this offseason with Kyler Murray, and that ended up being not as big of a deal. I mean, obviously, he wanted a new contract, all that. We've seen that with other players and stuff like that, too. So we'll see exactly what happens there. I will tell you, I have not heard anything that includes CJ Gardner-Johnson as a part of the trade package. It doesn't mean that he's not. That doesn't mean that things didn't change after the second meeting last night with the New Orleans Saints and Deshaun Watson. However, that's just letting you know what I've heard so far. Cesar Ruiz, Eric McCoy on the offensive line, right guard and center. Those are replaceable positions, especially in this year's draft. Trenches are deep. There's also still some good free agents out there. You also have some options in the building. James Hurst can play on the interior. You have a guy like Calvin Throckmorton who can play any of the 5 positions on the offensive line. Maybe not necessarily center, but 4 of the other positions on the offensive line, either guard spot, either tackle spot. So you have some versatility there with the guys you already have in the building, plus you have options in terms of replaceability in the draft as well as in free agency. The other piece would be on the defensive side, guys like Paulsen Adebo, Pete Werner, Marcus Davenport, whose contract was recently restructured. I would probably look at like Peyton Turner in there as well. So there are a couple of players that the Saints would be able to move that are on rookie deals that are young. Maybe not necessarily in Peyton Turner's case, just because he hasn't had the time. He's been injured, all this other stuff. So it's hard to call him starter quality at this point. Doesn't mean that he won't become that, but right now, hard to sell that. But Paulsen Adebo kept Bradley Roby, who was a former Houston Texan, off the field in 2021. And the Saints just extended Bradley Roby for what I'm expecting to be probably 2 or 3 seasons. So with all of that, the New Orleans Saints have those young pieces to move. They would be tough pieces to part with, especially guys like CJ Gardner-Johnson and Paulsen Adebo. But if they're able to move those offensive linemen, either one of the offensive linemen, as much as Eric McCoy has been phenomenal for the team, has been really, really beneficial for the team as one of the best centers to come into the NFL since he was drafted, you can still replace that, right? You can still find ways to get all that done. You could even potentially move Cesar Ruiz back to his natural position at center, see if he performs there, and then fill the hole at right guard as opposed to filling the hole at center if McCoy is the player that moves. So what we've heard in terms of taking those parameters and then looking at what the asking price has been from the Houston Texans, we've heard a little bit more specificity. The young starter quality players on cheap rookie contracts does not change. The 3 first-round picks does not change. But we've heard a little bit more specificity about the additional draft compensation, which tends to be 2 second-round picks. So 3 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, player or players. I don't think that the New Orleans Saints are going to go that far. I don't think that they're going to give up 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. We'll see. They might. But again, you're talking about potential further charges and accusations that could pop up. You're talking about a potential 6-game suspension, and you're talking about a guy that doesn't want to play for the Houston Texans. The Texans don't have really a lot of, they don't really have a lot of leverage here, right? Like they want the 3 first-round picks because they need to be able to rebuild, and I'm sure that they want those like young players. And it helps with a team like the New Orleans Saints, who are going to have to make a little bit of salary cap space anyway to get him under the salary cap before they restructure his deal. So that all works out. But in terms of, hey, give me the additional draft compensation, who do you think you are? Like you don't have any leverage there. So let me tell you about some of the packages that I've heard. Some of the packages that I've heard include 3 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and Paulsen Adebo. That's one that I've heard. I've also heard 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and Cesar Ruiz. That was one that was actually floated, right? These aren't submissions. I don't know anything about any submissions that have been made. That information is not public. I'm just talking about what I've heard in terms of players, pieces, all of that could be a part of this deal. One of the people that's really been on the front of all of this, the front end of all this, is Aaron Wilson, who is with PFN. You can hear him over on Locked on Texans with Cody and John every Friday as well. And he's a Houston insider. This is what he does. And he's the one that talked a little bit about the Cesar Ruiz part of the deal, because apparently the Houston Texans really like Cesar Ruiz. And if you can trade 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and Cesar Ruiz to get your starting quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years, it's a pretty fine deal, to be able to do something like that. So I think that those 2 options are definitely there. Another one that I think Nick Underhill actually floated, which again is not reporting, right? These are potential deals. For 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and Eric McCoy, I think he mentioned. He might have also mentioned Cesar Ruiz. But those trade packages are not a lot when you think about getting your franchise quarterback, right? So you can only use one half of your brain in that situation. Then you kind of have to use the other half of the brain to say, okay, well, is it worth it with the suspension, potential future accusations, present and past accusations, right? So there's all these other pieces to it, right? This is not going to be simple by any means. But if you're the New Orleans Saints, it seems that they've reconciled all that other stuff and that they're just ready to get Deshaun Watson. And so if that's the case, and that's the trade package that you give up for a starting quarterback and a potential franchise-altering quarterback, that's a fine package. That's a fine set of packages that you're going to be able to give up because, again, you're expecting to potentially be able to trade Sean Payton's rights. Now, he has to go and do media this year and then choose to come back to coaching before his contract expires with the Saints in order for that to happen. That might not happen, right? He might not come back to coaching, in which case, then they don't get those 2 first-round picks back, but they just lost Marcus Williams. They'll get another 3rd-round pick in 2023, very likely with compensatory picks, as opposed to them getting a 4th and a 6th this year. They got another 3rd this year, so they now have 2 thirds. So it kind of gives them a little bit of extra leverage to be able to trade away one of those 3rd-round picks this year, and then a player, whoever that player might be, along with those 3 first-round picks. So what do you think? I mean, any of those packages sound appealing to you? Let me know. You can reach out however you like, as well as in YouTube, on Twitter at Ross Jacksonilla, all those different ways. But if you think that those trade packages are good enough packages, I would expect those to be more accurate in terms of what the actual compensation is that's given up, with maybe an additional pick and maybe additional players, right? It might be 2 players as opposed to 1. But it seems like Cesar Ruiz continues to be connected here and might be a part of that deal. So we'll see. If you can turn Cesar Ruiz into a tradable asset despite the struggles that he has had in your offense, it's a pretty good situation for the New Orleans Saints, who, of course, have a fallback plan and have a backup plan. But what they don't have a fallback plan or a backup plan at just yet is wide receiver. It's one of the reasons why I think that it's the next position that they really, really need to be focused on once they finish up and wrap up all this quarterback talk. But it seems that they're not necessarily as connected to a specific prospect that would have been a great addition for them. Let's talk about that and their other options remaining as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked on Saints. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at rockauto.com, the best place to go for all the parts, pieces, and accessories that you need, no matter what kind of vehicle you drive. If it's your daily driver, if you are rebuilding a classic, this is the place that you need to go. Honestly, especially if you're rebuilding a classic, because this place is going to save you a ton of money on all those parts, body parts, accessories, everything that you need. So just head over to rockauto.com. Easy to navigate menu, select the make, model, and year of your vehicle, as well as what part you're looking for, piece, accessory, whatever it is. And then you're going to get a ton of options that are going to save you 30, 50, 70% from what you would probably end up spending over at the chain stores, that are going to upcharge you because you're not a wholesale person. You're not a professional. You're a do-it-yourselfer or whatever. None of that exists over at rockauto.com. Everybody pays the same price. Imagine that. So go and check them out. Get everything you need for your car, truck, your vehicle, your daily driver, your project, whatever it is that you're working on over at rockauto.com. Don't forget to let them know that Locked On sent you for writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. The New Orleans Saints look to be closing in on Deshaun Watson, might already be of the final two, along with the Atlanta Falcons. But if they land Deshaun Watson, who's he throwing the football to is going to be a big question to answer here over the course of the offseason. Now, you might have Alvin Kamara at the beginning of the season, but he might also be serving an early suspension, just like Deshaun Watson could. You also will have Michael Thomas back, which is extremely helpful. But then who else do you have? Now, the Saints did bring back Deontay Hardy as expected on a restricted free agent deal. They gave him a second-round tender, which does give other teams the opportunity to submit offer sheets, but it does give the Saints the chance to match any of those offer sheets. It also buys them time to try to work out a multi-year deal with Deontay Hardy, which I do expect that they will find a way to do, or at least pursue. If the Saints do lose Deontay Hardy to another team that has submitted an offer sheet, they would get a second-round pick back this season for that. I think that price ends up keeping teams away from submitting an offer sheet, however. But the New Orleans Saints could potentially go the route of maybe a Jakeem Grant contract, which you just recently saw sign, which was about 3 years, $4.6 million or so per season, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's a really, really good opportunity there for the Saints to be able to find out exactly what it is that they can give for a guy like Deontay Hardy. But outside of that, one of the big names that they were early on connected to once he was released from the Cleveland Browns was Jarvis Landry, potentially bringing Jarvis Landry back to Louisiana, giving him a little Louisiana homecoming. Well, he visited with a team in the NFC South, but it was the Atlanta Falcons. Kind of gross. The thing about that is that reportedly, according to New Orleans.football's Nick Underhill, it seems that maybe the New Orleans Saints weren't really as connected to Jarvis Landry as initially reported. It seemed that the two teams that showed the most interest, quote unquote, per reports, in Jarvis Landry were the New Orleans Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs. But then his first visit is with the Atlanta Falcons, which, by the way, Traquan Smith also set to visit the Atlanta Falcons. Also gross. So when it comes down to adding Jarvis Landry, maybe that's not necessarily the route that the New Orleans Saints go. Now, they still have the NFL draft ahead of them. Even if they spend a first-round pick in this potential trade here, they should still be able to find talent at the wide receiver spot in the draft. If they hold on to a second-round pick, if they hold on to one of those third-round picks, one of those could easily go to wide receiver, and then you could circle back to it again in day 3 and still find really, really good options like, let's say, a Velus Jones Jr. out of Tennessee, which is a name I have to say, please watch for in this year's draft for the New Orleans Saints. Eric Ezukanma, for instance, out of Texas Tech. So there's a lot of different options. And those are just two. I'm saying that's a lot, but there are a lot. But what about free agency? I'm surprised at this point at how slowly the wide receiver market has moved, but I visited our friends over at Saints Happy Hour in one of their spaces, Ralph and Andrew, and we talked about the two positions that I thought would probably see the least amount of action or maybe have that sort of weird market that we have seen in the past. And so I mentioned wide receiver being one of those because of how oversaturated it was in the market, but also how oversaturated it is in terms of talent in the draft. And there's a lot of quarterback movement going on across teams, which means that wide receivers may be waiting around to see, hey, do I want to return to my team based upon the quarterback situation? Do I want to go somewhere else because of their quarterback situation? All of that. So some teams that are acquiring new quarterbacks are also acquiring new selling points for those wide receivers to land with their teams. Another reason why I think you haven't seen that wide receiver market move as much. If New Orleans lands Deshaun Watson, all of a sudden, they become a far more enticing place than a franchise that looked like it would have had to move forward with either a rookie quarterback, Taysom Hill or Ian Book, right? If they sign Jameis Winston, they become more appealing than that same alternative. So I think that if that's the case, or with that being the case, New Orleans should still be looking at this wide receiver market thinking that it can go ahead and make some moves there. Allen Robinson, DJ Chark, who I think would still be a phenomenal addition for this team. Marcus Valdez-Scantling, also a really, really good one. That would be a fantastic addition. Will Fuller, a little Kenny Stills-ish, and I'm not just saying that just because he's also a former Texan and Miami Dolphin, but, you know, you've got some injury concerns, things that have kept him off the field, a little bit of case of the drops there. So, you know, maybe you don't necessarily roll the dice there, but if you want somebody to stretch the field and has some chemistry with a Deshaun Watson, for instance, Will Fuller makes a ton of sense. So you look at all of that the same way that you have seen players returning to the Bucs once Tom Brady signed in Tampa Bay or returned to Tampa Bay after his 40-day retirement. you could see a similar situation for New Orleans once they figure out who their next quarterback is and once the league figures out who their next quarterback is. So you have a lot of options that are out there. There are also some smaller options. Jamison Crowder, for instance, would be a very affordable slot receiver that can come in and challenge guys like Marquez Callaway and Deontay Hardy in the slot, right? You can wait until the draft, of course, but if you don't want to do that, there are still a ton of options available in free agency. And perhaps the first domino for that is about to fall. And that is where we will continue and pick up as we continue on with this week. Free agency week already been absolutely insane so far over the course of this week, but the New Orleans Saints and their pursuit of Deshaun Watson is not slowing down anytime soon, although it does seem that we might see some resolution in terms of where he will wind up over the course of maybe the next 24 hours. If it happens today, I'll have another episode up for you, and we'll talk all about the addition of Deshaun Watson, the conflict it brings, the success it potentially brings to the field, how to balance that, and then what happens next, right? Where do the other pieces come from? How do you continue to build around Deshaun Watson? What happens with this contract? We'll break it all down for you as we continue on here every Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Thank you so much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Now, you want to hear more about those wide receivers in the draft? Head over to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Make them your second listen of the day today, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well. Eric Crocker, Ryan Tracy, got it all covered up for you as well. And I do want to mention Ryan Tracy at Ryan Tracy NFL on Twitter does have his own analytics guide. It's like $9 and it's incredible. Go and check it out. It's a athletics matrix, functional athletic matrix. It's awesome. It gives you a whole bunch of insight into the athletic properties of these players coming into the NFL draft. So go and check that out. And of course, he'll be talking about it over on Locked On NFL Draft, as well. Appreciate you as always, y'all, for making me a part of your day. For everything you need around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.